Baltimore horror fiends grew up watching a slew of horror hosts. Dr. Lucifer, Ghost Host, Count Gore, Sir Graves Ghastly, and the Great Zucchini. Fanex's Nostalgia Vision, held February 1993, brought together 3 of those hosts for a once-in-a-lifetime chat. Also appearing was beloved Baltimore TV personality Stu Kerr. The stations rarely treated these programs with respect, and little footage or even photographs remain today. But Fanex continued their preservation of movie history with this ghoulishly fabulous reunion.
Exciting. I want to thank you first for coming to Nostalgia Vision. What we have here tonight, well today, I've been up since 8, so. We have Baltimore's local horror hosts and television hosts. Today we're having a children's television panel, and sitting next to me is Dyszel, who is Captain 20. We have Bill Littman. He wasn't a panel guy. He's just doing it.
I have not done, nor have I ever been the moderator of the children's television program. At least not yet.
We have Richard Dix, who is Officer Happy back in the 50s. We have George Lewis, who is Captain Chesapeake under the BFF. And we have Stu Kerr, who is Professor Kool. Okay, what I'd like to do first is just go down and get a quick synopsis of your career, wrapped up in 5 minutes, a couple of minutes. Mr. Dyszel, how did you get started as Captain 20?
I needed a job and happened to be there. In all seriousness, I was hired by Channel 20 to do Bozo. And they said, by the way, while you're here, you'll also be Captain 20. And I said, no, I won't. And he said, and it was for the same salary. And what is Captain 20? I'd never heard of Captain 20. I was the 3rd Captain 20. And we finally made a deal where I'd do Captain 20, and they were going to do Concord Ball. So that was the genesis of me doing Captain 20. I brought with me, I'll explain real quickly, some photos here I dug out. When Channel 20 was bought by TVX Broadcasting in 1986, they threw away their entire archives of photos and films and stuff for the promotional stuff. And I dug it quite literally out of the dumpster. I brought along with me some stuff. The first one will be the first Captain 20, Johnny K, with Willard Scott as Ronald McDonald. That goes back to 1969. Then is Tony Alexi as the second Captain 20. He was there from like 1970 to 1972. They were both Earth astronauts. I came along in 1972. I wanted to be more alien because I didn't want to be using those copy besides I was much taller than both of them. I couldn't fit into the costume. You got to start over again. So I went with an alien with too much owl spot. And that was me, the first one, or the first 2 were me in the third 1972, including being one of the monkeys for the monkey races. Then the very evolution of the various sets and costumes. And up to the point where we got rid of the ears and the funny wig and the platform shoes with Chuck combo, and finally the other children's host that wasn't mentioned as Bozo, which I did from 72 to 77. But I was hired basically as Bozo because I was doing Bozo in another market, and they had Tony was doing Bozo, and they didn't like the job he was doing, so they wanted to hire a different clown. So I got hired.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dix.
Well, I've always have been interested in theater, which is my primary reason, I think, for existing. At the time, most of you people would not remember one thing that I did because you all aren't gray enough.
I don't remember it either.
That's because of his memory. My show was Officer Happy. It was a kids show, and we used to introduce the our gang comedies, The Little Rascals. And this took place from 1954 to 1959. So most of you weren't around. And how I got the job was very simple. I worked for WBAL-TV in lighting and scenery. I was building scenery and lighting the sets. And they bought the package of films known as The Little Rascals. And they didn't just want to throw them on. And the program director, Sid King, knew of my theatrical experience and my theatrical background. And so he asked me if I could come up with something to intro these films. And I looked at a couple of the films, and then they had the The Keystone Cop was in a couple of them, so I just picked that character out, gave him an Irish brogue, and then for about 4 years, I would introduce the films. Then we, the usual stuff that you try to do during that era, when people were very strong on morals and the concept of living and good behavior and being polite to one another and watching your language and obeying police officers and all that kind of stuff. That was what was going on then. And we tried to reinforce that attitude through all the children that would watch the show. I had a hell of a good time. I really enjoyed what I was doing because it was alive, it was instant theater, and I felt that I was making some kind of a small contribution and enjoyed it very, very much. And but I wouldn't do it now. If you paid me $250,000, I wouldn't want to get mixed up in it anymore. That's the kid show. That's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lewis.
Captain Chesapeake is a total copy of another show. The show was called Steamboat Bill, which was on successfully in Huntington, West Virginia for about 10 years. I don't feel bad about copying it because I was Steamboat Bill in Huntington, West Virginia. Steamboat Bill had a sea monster named Merlin the Monster. His name became Monty after Baltimore. There was Andrew Claus the Lion. There was a couple of lizards named Lawrence and Lisa the Lizard in the show at Huntington that we didn't use here. But it was really the same show, recreated almost the same set. We had a lot of time at Steamboat Bill. And of course, he was on the Ohio River. And that whole area is very conscious of the river. And just to tell you one instance, the steamboat captains coming down from Pittsburgh, down the Ohio River to Carroll, Illinois, and then down the Mississippi River. When they were in the range of the station from Athens, Ohio area down through almost to Cincinnati, they would watch my show and get a big kick out of this riverboat captain. And especially one day when I was telling Lisa and Lawrence the Lizard and the sea monster and all of them, now when we go downriver, be sure when we get to Carroll, Illinois, to turn left. Well, this amused the heck out of the captains of all the riverboats, and that got to be a favorite saying. And when the captains were talking to one another about weather conditions or about the conditions of the next lock or whatever, they would always wind up with, now don't forget, when you get to Carroll, Illinois, turn left. So this became a favorite saying for all the captains on the river. It was great fun, and I wanted to come to Baltimore because I was raised here. My wife and I are both from Baltimore. And we left Huntington, really had a great job, and moved to Baltimore with no job. And 42 years old, 5 daughters and a wife, and that takes an incredible optimist to do something like that. But sure enough, I found there was a station that was hoped to get on the air soon, and I went in and talked to them about hiring me. And essentially, Captain Chesapeake was Steamboat Bill with different names.
Thank you. And Mr. Kerr.
Well, it goes back. I guess the one question I'm asked mostly is how in the world did you get into children's entertaining? I had no intention of doing that. I'm from New York City. I wanted to be another Mel Allen if I couldn't play center field for the Yankees. I wanted to at least do the play-by-play broadcasting. Well, I got down to Annapolis, small station there, my first announcing job at age 19. And I met about 3 other announcers who knew more about sports than I did, so I gave that up real quickly. I went from there to Frederick, from Frederick to Washington, D.C., into the Army during the Korean War, came back, and all my buddies had moved to the bigger cities, Washington and Baltimore, and I got a job at WMAR. In those days, we were just laughing about a month or 2 ago, reading about, what's her name, the gal at Channel 2, who's starting at Jay-Z.
Sally Thorne?
Sally Thorner at $250,000.
Right.
a year. I left Channel 2 11 years ago last October, and I believe I was the top paid at the time, and my salary was $45,000. But we had no contracts. There were no contracts. There was no specialty. You know, no one was a newscaster or a sportscaster. Mr. Richard, a weather forecaster and the like. We were staff announcers, and you did anything and everything. Now, what I hate to make, I don't want to make this too long, but what happened, how I got into children's entertainment, is, believe it or not, we used to sign off the air at 11:30 at night. And pretty soon WBAL and WAAM, which was WJZ at the time, they started staying on till midnight and doing a 12 o'clock newscast, not with an anchor man, I mean just with slides, you know, news of Maryland, sports news, Washington news, and the like. And so they posted, and most of MAR was run by ex-Sun papers, reporters and the like. They knew nothing about show business or television. They posted on the bulletin board, whoever's on duty that night, do something. I said, there is a musician. And so I looked out the window downtown, and I saw all the lights on of the buildings at 11:30 at night. And I said, that's what I'll do. I'll become, but they were all janitors cleaning the building, I'll become a TV janitor. And so that's how my sort of slipping away from the staff mold took place. I pantomimed records. I finally convinced them to move into the morning shift. When I got shifted to the morning, we called it the early riser. And instead of, I started using puppets. And once I used puppets, I got labeled as a kid's entertainer. From there, I was asked to do Bozo. When Scott was just starting Bozo in Washington, I did Bozo in Baltimore for 10 years. And we had quite an audience. I hated it. I couldn't stand the makeup. I was in the, and you know, that plus, I think I was in the makeup about 20 times a week with appearances around town. And when what happened was, the last few years of Bozo, I would say, these were live, so you know, it wasn't videotaped. I'd say, okay, let's take a break and watch a Bozo cartoon, and the kids would go, 45 of them. And the management said, what's wrong? I said, they're tired of these old cartoons. The sprocket holes are ruined. And I said, and I have devised so many games that they want to play the game. And he said, well, they have another idea. I said, I have an idea for a professor. I said, and I described the costume. I said, instead of the circus motif, we'll have a school motif. And that's how Professor Kool started, without cartoons, and we played games. And Bozo ran 14, rather ran 10. Professor Kool ran 14. And when we went off the air, believe it or not, we had a crowd of 50,000 waiting to get on the show. But they took it off because they wanted more of an educational type show than just sort of a fun show. So that briefly is how I got from into the kids.
45,000? I'd have killed for 45,000.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, people have a strange idea of the kind of money we make.
Oh yeah.
I got $5 a show. I was on 5 days a week, an hour each day. Before that, I got $5. So that was $25. And if they had a live commercial that you did, I got another $7.50. There were times when I almost made $100 a week during my show, but then they considered that at the time. And even I have to confess, even I considered it good money. I didn't realize, and all the personal appearances were generally for free, because the salesman would sell books price viewing, and he'd say, also, if you buy this airtime on radio, I can get Officer Happy to come out and host a Saturday afternoon get along. And so I'd be told to report here, and there was no money on my part, never stayed in. I think all three of us know that what we, and this gentleman too, if what we know, if we knew then what we know now, we could be a hell of a lot better off financially than we are.
Let me just add one thing to what Richard is saying, and I think it answers the whole question. There was an article in the paper, it was Friday or Thursday about Jay-Z and BAL fighting for the 11 o'clock news leadership. Did you see that? Well, did you see what they get for a 30-second spot? Everything ranging from $600, a 30-second spot, to $2,000 in this market, if they are number one. That is the difference. There was no kind of money. I mean, they were paying, I don't know what, I couldn't even guess. I never sold any time. But you're talking $75 maybe for a 30-second spot, or for a minute spot. There were no 30-second commercials in those days. They were all minutes. So that goes along with the difference. If you are good enough to demand, or to get a good rating, then they naturally will pay you because they can charge more for their.
I feel like it's a very interesting company here. Listening to the stories, I was aware that we had those Bozo on the
Yeah.
I can empathize wholeheartedly with the makeup
Oh.
and all that. But it's interesting you mentioned Carroll, Illinois, because I got my start at Bozo in Paducah, Kentucky, which is just upstream from Carroll. In fact, I can tell you a story about Carroll covering the news election down there, but I won't get into that. It's a real rough town. Bozo, and then the personal appearances, you're right. Every salesman in the world, hey, folks, no problem. We'll throw in a Bozo PA, and by the way, Dick, hey, I'll get you a six-pack, if you go out and do this for me. Excuse me! Put an end to that real fast.
And there's Saturdays and Sundays.
Oh.
And
I've never had a Saturday.
When when I was in Paducah, besides doing Bozo, we did, of course, the Countdown. I also was a news anchor. Yes. All staff announcers did everything.
Sure.
And there isn't really that, there's not that much of a generational difference in this. And it was an 80-hour week, which is one of the reasons that drove me out of Kentucky into Washington. I said, no way, I was like going to do 80 hours. Most of it was personal appearances on Saturdays and Sundays. It was hellacious. Because everyone wanted the kids' host. In this case, Bozo had a national rating. Bozo cartoons were really terrible.
Yeah.
Even with good sprocket holes, they were terrible. The other thing was, and Larry, you can forgive me for this, Larry Harmon was really not that swell either. He was the originator and copyright owner of Bozo. Right. And he never had a creative idea beyond 1950 in his life.
Let me just add one thing right there while you're on that. I used to receive a letter once a month from Larry Harmon, just the person he's talking about, and they would say, I hear you're doing wonderful in Baltimore with Bozo. And he would send forms that he wanted me to fill out explaining everything I did on the show. All he wanted to do was steal all my material because I had made up games and had nothing to do with Bozo. The only thing he had were the cartoons and the rights to the costume that you see. But every month I would get one of them. I just wrap it up and throw it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mine got filed the same way.
Yeah.
Too. Actually, Larry came to town one day.
I never met him.
I knew Larry intimately, unfortunately. He came to town one day and he spent 12 hours berating me for having this very successful show in Washington. We were outrating at 2:30. We were outrating all the cartoons that followed later. So even with the kids in school, we had higher ratings than Ultraman and Speed Racer and all that. When we canceled the show, I don't know how many kids it were, but we had 2.5-year backlog of kids wanting to get on the Bozo show. And what we had done was, quite literally, I realized that this was going nowhere with the format that Larry had put in his big Bozo manual, which I still have. We turned it into a kids' game show. And it was a natural way to go. We had prizes, and it was very successful. And he came to town for 12 hours. He told me where a lot of the show was and how we weren't following the format. We weren't doing what he had said in 1950 and how we should change it to make the show better. And for 12 hours, I told him he was full crap. We never had a very good relationship.
Well, fortunately, I never had that generally because it was all mine. Any mistakes fell on me, and I think the same with George. And it's interesting that I worked when Stu was hired at MAR. I was working there at MAR at the time, in scenery and lighting. And every time there was an opening for an announcer slot, I would go into Tom Cochran or a man named Jet and ask to be auditioned, and they would always say no.
Get the best voice in the building.
And they always, And they don't. Well, they were afraid of what I would do.
Yes.
I was told by Mr. Cochran.
It's also harder to replace a carpenter.
That they were always afraid of what I might say on the air, because I was kind of free.
Yes, you were.
And would answer the telephone in dialects or phony accents and this kind of stuff, which distressed management. And I think you're right, George. I think the only reason they kept me was because a good stage carpenter was hard to find.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd have been thrown out of that job too. But I tell you, Stu, and George and I grew up together, and were friends from many. George was the best man at my wedding, and we both went to Children's Theater here in Baltimore. The Children's Theater Association. George had a great deal of interest in theater, as did I. And when I got thrown out, and that's the correct word, of VAL in 1960, I just went from there and went on into professional theater, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
You had a chance to rent a movie. Siskel and Ebert recommends it too. It's called The Black Marble. Rent it. And the Russian shopkeeper is Richard Dix. You'll recognize him.
I'll do anything for money.
What was you would go back to kids' TV for $250 million?
No, that's an exception.
What was the soap that you thought you had a real good lock on? You thought it was going to last for a while?
Oh, that
Was it
broadcast. That was
Yeah.
that was the character on the running soap opera at the Christian Broadcast Network, Pat Robinson's. And it was their show. It was called Another Life, which meant biblically being reborn again. All the good people on the show were literally born again Christians, and all the bad people like myself were not born again Christians. And I thought I had this because it was selling their product on their television network, and I thought I had a ticket for the rest of my life, only it wasn't making money, so they took it off the air.
Until that day when you raised your hand and yelled, "I believe!" and somebody said you were fired. You weren't supposed to.
Out there, it wasn't making money. But that's a sidebar. It has nothing to do with children. So, but I am glad, personally, as I said, that I was in it then, because nobody knew all that. There were no experts around when I started, and when Stu and George. There weren't consultants to come in and tell you what to do. You did it. You made mistakes. Some of them were dumb. Some of them were stupid. But at least we were honest with it. And our goals, I think, and I'm going to put us up on a higher plane, were a little more altruistic than they are today. And I had I really enjoyed the contact that I had with the children. And I enjoyed the fact, and I know these gentlemen did too, the fact that the kids kind of respected what we stood for and what we were trying to do, and that made you feel kind of good. Today, I'm not so certain that that's the object behind the children's shows, and I think that's a shame. Fortunately, the stations were looking to occupy time because we were all new. I mean, television hadn't been in the air in Baltimore. In 1945, I think, it was MAR in the air. So it was all new. Nobody knew nothing. And they had to fill time. And so, like, what can you do to fill 5 minutes if you're not doing the news, weather, or sports? Which was only a few seconds. And that was only 5 minutes. 5 for news, 5 for sports, and 5 for the weather. That's all it was. And so we did have the opportunity of breaking new ground and finding our way, and without too much supervision, which was really good for me. It made me last as long as somebody had bossed me around. I would not have lasted long.
We were playing.
Huh?
Or I was playing.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It was fun.
Fun.
But that play was communicated well to us. One of those kids who sat in front of Officer Happy's TV screen here back at the age of 8. We used to think that Darla Hood and the Little Rascal was my age, but we had a great time, and it's, Officer Happy, top of the morning to you, tell us you brush your teeth, make sure you put bed before 9 o'clock and all that kind of stuff. I wish you told me stuff, eating peanut butter sandwiches. But anyway, it was always terrific to watch these guys. I'd like to ask you, what was it like on these little soirees out into the public, talking to your little fans? And what was that like?
It was it could get kind of rough. I mean, I've leveled many a store, and
When they didn't take.
well, yeah, exactly. They didn't in other words, the front door was there, and they were putting me on the stage, and between the front door and this stage was all their merchandise, on various tables. I said, "You're kidding." I said, "All that will be ruined in like 2 minutes." And they said, I said, "Because they're not going to walk in. They're not going to form a single line." I said, "They're going to storm me in." And I went to Westminster. I couldn't believe it one time. I went to Westminster, and it was pouring rain. It was, and I said, "What am I making this stupid drive for? I'm sure this thing is going to be canceled." And so I stopped on my way and called up, and they said, "Stu, they're in every store in the shopping center." Well, believe it or not, I got there at 5 o'clock and left at midnight when the crowd finally stopped. I used to, you go out with a, I've got my back is bad now, but it was just as bad then after a session like this. And with the kids, as far as you could see, and one thing I learned was you just couldn't say, "Hi, how are you, Joey? Good to see you." Move right along. And I go, because the mother would look at you and to say, "I've been online for 4 hours." And so what I did was, I took an old Scottish game my father taught me and gave it to Bozo. And what it was, my father, when I was young, would put his hands like this together. And you would put your hands up, and you would take your hands and do this, and say, "Poor little birdie, stick up your ears." And when that happened, you take your hand and hit his head, and you had to try to get away from him. So what I simply did was take that little game and called it "Poor little Bozo, poor little Bozo, poor little Bozo, stick up your ear," and swing. And of course, if you slipped by, that was fun. And so I introduced it on the show, and 2 or 3 times later, every kid in the world wanted to play. They all liked it. But it gave me something to do in line, rather than just dismiss the kid that fast. And yet it was a game that could, that I could go through quickly, and that was enough to satisfy the parents. And
That's why I started the riddles.
yeah, see, you always have
Something else going, other than just, "Hi, here's a picture, thank you." Felt bad trying to make the line move, but the store manager is wanting to move fast.
I'm sure Stu's found the same thing, though, as Bozo. When he went out on personal appearances, you always had to watch the kids' eyes.
Oh, yes.
Watch their eyes. Because as soon as they locked onto your nose,
Yeah.
you knew where they were going. So you always watch, and then the other thing with the shoes, because the shoes were this big. Fortunately, your feet weren't, so it didn't hurt when you stepped on them. But the secret was always, signing the autographs, but while you're signing, you're always watching their eyes. "Well, how you doing?" See you. Make sure they don't go for the nose, because only once did they go for the nose.
Willard Scott taught me something about, he started Bozo about a month or 2 before I did. And he said, "Stu, whatever you do, don't have," and I never did, "a rubber nose." Because most of the time Bozo had a rubber nose that the kids would squeeze. And of course, you give it the horn, treatment from years. And so what I did was I had a hard plastic ball, a plastic ball that I cut out and was very, very fine string here. The only thing wrong is, it was just as bad. They couldn't squeeze it, but they'd pull it. And I'd see the nose coming back, or sometimes the nose would land here, And it was nothing worse. You talk about having done, this was almost as good as sex. On a day when you had a cold winter day, when you had a cold and a runny nose, and you couldn't blow it because you had makeup on, you couldn't get your, and to get in the dressing room to whip that off and take it, oh boy, that was great. But that nose drove you crazy. That issue.
By that time, we had got to we had plastic, hollow plastic. It was hollow rubber, but the manual said let them squeeze it. And I told Larry, you're out of your mind. I have a little squeezer you put in my hand, So I said, forget that. So I said, one time, he said, you see it going out there, you know it's coming back. And that elastic was wonderful. But of course, with the cold, he stuffed the hollow nose with tissue paper so it didn't rip down too bad.
I never learned it.
That was actually Bozo was one. The ultimate revenge on my ultimate revenge on Bozo was actually having to cancel. In 1977, I went on vacation. I grew my mustache, and I came back, and my program director said, "Dick, I like the mustache. When are you going to cut it off?" And I said, "I like it. I think I'm going to keep it. How are you going to do Bozo with a mustache?" And I said, "Let's cancel Bozo." And he said, "No." I said, "Okay." So for one summer, we did a latex cover of the mustache. And then during this, I had this wonderful plot. I found out what we were paying for the rights to use the name Bozo. So I went to the general manager. I said, "Milt, what a deal I got for you." Up to this point, Bozo's been the show host. Captain 20 was doing nothing more than promotional stuff, contests, gerbil races, monkey races, trips to Disney World, club cards. All this was just promotional stuff. I said, "We've got an in-house person here, and we've got Bozo, and you're paying thousands of dollars just to use the name Bozo." I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. You cancel Bozo, give me that as a budget, I'll make you a hell of a kid show." And he said, wonderful idea. So he canceled Bozo, kept the money, and said, "Now do a kid show." So, but that was good. It was good timing because that was in the late 70s. We were talking about changes and experts and all this. This is when we were coming to a lot of fire for violence on television, which of course has had no effect on kids today for uses to school. And so forth. So Bozo was a fun show, but it was not. I could not feel like I was doing the educational as a clown, although other Bozos did. So we turned Captain 20 less alien, and like this costume here is the one we used when we came to actually do the Channel 20 Club show, which was the first show that Captain did, where we had kids on, went through a educational format, not informational format, I think more like it, and eventually went into a show that was. It had so many endorsements. We had 22 civic endorsements at the end of the show on the credits. The credits went for 90 seconds just to get all the endorsements on, so we wouldn't have a problem with people challenging our license, because we had a show that had all this, every school district in the Washington area was endorsed it for various reasons. So that was the real birth of Captain 20 as a show host rather than just a promotion character. That was devised. Bozo was the mustache was actually.
I had a real advantage when I started Steamboat Bill. I didn't want him to be a clown or anything far-fetched. And essentially, he was me. I was like my And we had adventures. We did things. I mean, I was playing a part in that sense. Going places in the Ohio River. We actually went down to Brazil when they started the new town, Brasilia. Building a new capital in the jungle. We went down there. So we had great adventures, but I never had to be a clown or nothing of that sort. So I was the father image, if you will, or later the grandfather image, and I could be pretty much myself. That was what I wanted.
Yeah, that was a lot. To be honest, that was a lot more fun. Captain finally evolved into me myself. It was a whole different fun.
Oh yeah.
Although different kind of fun. Bozo was fun because you get rid of a lot of slapstick stuff. That particularly after the kids are gone. We didn't do it live. We taped 5 shows in one day on Saturday. 3 shows before lunch and 2 shows after lunch. And the crew sort of staggered in after their lunch because they would go drink their lunch. But we do 5 shows on Saturday. And we just bring 75 kids to a show. I'll go 75 kids, 75 more kids to a show. I'll go 75 kids. I have enough time to go grab the water, and that'll be pretty much it. It'll be the warm-up for the next show. That was fun in a way, but I'm not sure. For $250,000, I'd do it again. But the captain was allowed me to be more myself, and which was, of course, I was consistent the other character we'll talk about later this afternoon. for teachers with adults. So dealing with kids was fun in a controlled situation. Dealing with the parents, not necessarily so. Dealing with personal appearances, I didn't do it. I was big personal appearances.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to all the problem with personal appearance and dealing with all mass kids, department stores, what have you. Is there a correlation between being a kid's host and being a late night horror host? Does that turn you into that?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that, again, you're dealing with people here who are staff announcers. Everybody was a staff announcer, and you were told what to do. And if you were a staff announcer, you could be a newscaster. If you were a kid show host, you could be a horror host. The horror, I had already been signed up to do Bozo against my better judgment. I wanted to go into the news. I was a rock and roll disc jockey, and they said, no, you're going to do Bozo. And I had no choice. I wanted to do my job. Besides, I was always going to go to Dallas for training. So but the fact of the matter is, they said, well, we're going to do a horror show. And I was sitting there munching to a couple cases of beer at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're looking at trailers for show openings, and we got a general manager who said, that's what we need, a horror host. And I just unfortunately blabbered out, yes, that's what we need, a horror host. That's it. I said, no, it's not even thought then. They said, do something. I knew shock theater from the 50s in Chicago, but that was all I knew. So, but yeah, I think it was due to the fact that, again, we're staff.
Of course, Richard, I think you got yours on the strength of all your stage work.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to talk too much about that now, because then I wouldn't have anything to talk about from 5 to 6.
Okay, I didn't realize that was.
What would really throw them though, if you've done Bozo or Officer Happy on the horror show. Now that would have been very much.
Actually, Gore made his first appearance on Channel 20 on the Bozo show. We did a Halloween special, and using split screen, Gore actually made his first appearance on the Bozo show. He turned all the kids into pumpkins. This is one of the few times we actually had a week to produce the show. And he turned all the kids into pumpkins, and Bozo had to learn the secret of Halloween, which I don't remember what it was. But once he learned, the kids would turn back, the pumpkins would turn back to the kids. But that's where he made his first appearance on Channel 20. That was at that point that I said, okay, well, yeah, this is Bozo, okay, if we want to do this thing over here on Saturday nights.
So, when you were young, were there any children's hosts at the radio show?
Oh, yeah. Saturday, let's pretend.
Yeah.
They came from Chicago, and they would dramatize fairy tales.
Yes.
And
what was the name of the woman?
Every Saturday was to Let's Pretend.
Yeah.
I met my radio boss had her back.
Yeah. I knew from New York. I'm trying to think of his name now. I can't. But this was the fellow that was on radio who was fired supposedly.
Oh yeah. That's
Uncle Don.
The wonderful story.
Yeah.
Every kid show.
I know. And he was supposedly off the air, and he said that little sons of bitches. And in those days, that was even nowadays they say that as.
How many times do people attribute that to you?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now I don't think anybody ever does.
Oh, I get it from something. Yeah, something along those.
Yeah, I would have kids come on the show
Yeah.
every week, and then some kid would come up to me and say, "Hey, Bozo, my friend was on the show when you said that."
Yeah. But the strange thing about it was when I was a youngster, he mentioned one of his great things was announcing birthdays, and he would announce where the gift was hidden.
Oh yeah.
It was behind the green chair in your living room, and of course, and he announced when I was a little kid that Stu Kerr, Yonkers, New York, was behind the piano. Well, I found the gift that I wanted, and that never left me. Now, when I started doing children's shows, I started faking it. Little Johnny Simpson and Gun Dog, Johnny, look behind, and I would point out from the screen the orange sofa. And of course, finally, the parents caught on, and the mail started coming in. Mr. Kerr, as you look out, there is a green chair. But I heard so many stories. My daughter used to watch your show in her pajamas. Since she figured you could see into our living room, she now covers up with a bathrobe. And of course, some of the stories, the parents would look behind the door to see the reaction as I announced their name and pointed to the object in their room. And sometimes they were just riveted right to their seat and couldn't move. But that was a little given. The only thing wrong with that is I would have to bring home a stack of letters.
Logistics.
Yeah. Thursday night to cover Fridays for the weekend.
42 kids have a birthday on a Saturday,
Right.
you got 10 minutes.
Exactly. And the whole family would write out, we put it on instead of a cue card, we get an 8-feet copy, that they run by. Because I didn't have time to pick up the letters and search for the name. I had something like 450 in an hour. And it was really rough.
And they get really angry. And they get real angry. You get nasty letters. If you were not able
Never
to
win.
comply with the wish.
Speaking of letters, you got letters of criticism from parents, I guess you did. The worst ones always started out the same way. My husband and I are both professional. When you opened the envelope and saw that, you knew what was coming.
Well, again, by the late 70s, we were taking it on the kid no matter what we did. As a matter of fact, even in the early 70s, when we started as Captain 20, I just copied off the spot, Move Along and Prosper. 1 week into that, I get a letter from a mother that says, that's cruel. Her son had leukemia. It's cruel to tell him to live along and prosper. He's not going to live long. He's going to die. Why are you telling him to do that?
But I think that's a time in my life when I learned
It was wrong.
that this is not a level playing field. That we don't live in a level playing field area. Some people are going to get breaks, and some people aren't. And there ain't a damn thing you can do about it except learn to go with the flow and accept what comes your way. And it's tough when you get letters like that. And occasionally we would get some things in my memory so you'd look at it and you'd say, well, tough. I mean, that's the way life is. It's not meant to be perfect. And you just keep on moving down the line with it. Some of the stuff, sometimes you hurt people by not being able to do what they want or you say things. But my basic premise was as long as I knew my intentions were honorable and what I was saying on the air, the best of my knowledge and the best of my ability was good advice or true, then if you didn't like it, then that's your truth.
I think as a young performer, when you start out in this business, letters like that or comments really hurt. As you get a little older and get a few years, under your belt, you start saying you can't please them.
Kids usually have a great sense of humor. I had a letter one time about silent movies. Youngster's mother talked to him about silence. And I started talking about it. I said, if you would like to, and not what we want, I'll try to find an old silent movie and run it. And I got the most delightful letter from a young man who had written from time to time, who was blind. And in the most good-natured way, voting against him. What a delight he was. And he was laughing at himself. Yeah, it was so beautiful. Some of the memories you take away are from kids who, oh God, I learned so much.
You mentioned, tell your story. You mentioned a blind child. I went to a hospital, and a boy was to lose his left eye. And that morning I got there, and he had lost both eyes. The doctor and his parents were just broken up, and they asked me, his one wish was to squeeze the nose and to feel the feet, of both of them. And I want to tell you, there was a room full of tears, and even running down the makeup, that I had, and just this kid climbing all over me. I had one other experience that I found hard to believe. I was for a school for mentally retarded children, and I have I do an hour stage show and a lot of tricks that really don't work. And I picked up, and I never knew, with a school like this, you're never too sure, who to pick, who has the ability to do what you want to help you on stage. So I picked this little girl, and I saw the teachers go like this. Oh, that was the wrong one. She came up, and I told her, what I want you to do is this. She did everything. And she left the stage, and I looked, and the teachers were sort of staring at her. Well, I went back to the school 6 months later, they said, Mr. Kerr, it's certainly, I hope you can do something like you did last time. And I said, well, what did I do last time? And I had not been told. And don't ask me why. I have no. This child, for some reason, on stage, everything clicked. And in a matter of weeks, left the school, I don't understand it, and was back in regular public school but the teachers claim that, I mean, I didn't know it. I was just, something happened on stage that day. Now, I don't know if that's possible or what, but that was the result of that circumstance.
Okay, folks. What I want to do now is we have 5 minutes left.
You want to ask a question?
Yeah. I know you guys want to ask a lot of questions. So, is there any questions out there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just hearing the horror stories of the clown story. I don't know if you guys watch The Simpsons, but Krusty the Clown, I guess you can really relate.
Oh, yeah.
And second question is, Mr. Lewis, how did you go to Ghostbusters? I know this is for kids.
Yeah, that comes at 5 o'clock today.
Okay, I'm glad.
It was just a question of having a package of films, and I was kind of the management thing. But you did everything. I painted scene too. And we had a package of horror films, and it was just more saleable if there was a host on the show.
Yeah, that was great. I didn't miss the show.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Lewis, when Fox Network took over 45, was it their decision to replace Chesapeake, or did you just decide?
No, that's a misnomer. Fox Network never took over Channel 45. Channel 45 has always been owned by the Smith family. The relationship between Channel 45 and Fox is the same as with WJZ, Channel 13, and ABC. It's purely an affiliate of the network. Promotion might lead you to believe that Fox 45 is owned by Fox. It's not.
It seems like there was a lot of changes when that happened.
There were a lot of changes.
That has something to do with Chesapeake being replaced by something else?
Not directly. Frankly, there's a promotion director who wanted me out.
Sooner or later, you run into that kind of business.
And it just made it very difficult for me. And when I wrote the letter of resignation, the owners offered me everything but a stock in the company to stay, but I knew it wouldn't work because I still had to do it. So it was really a promotion director who made it no longer fun. And since we weren't making a fortune, if it wasn't fun, why am I going in there every day?
Any other questions?
I've heard the story, but I don't know, these people might be interested in hearing about when the Lost in Space robot visited with Captain 20 for a while, and some of the behind-the-camera hijinks.
We had the Lost in Space robot in 1973 come by. It was supposed to be for a weekend of taping. And my director got into the suit. This is the most horrible suit in the world because there's no real head in it. You had to have a short trunk because you had a saddle that went right in your crotch. So you had to scrunch down the end of his head on. And this guy was one of his in theater. And we did everything, did the imitations and all this. But the funny thing about it is the fact that he had the robot for 6 months. And 20th Century Fox threatened a lawsuit to get the robot back. Because we kept saying, well, we just can't for one reason or another. So we've ended up sending it back in the crate. It was going to Las Vegas for a show. And it was something that we put a note on his chest. Warning, warning, Will Robinson. I've been doing kid shows for so long. Please keep me away from the gaming tables robot. It was something like that. It was an interesting little thing. Because Charlie, who was doing it, always upstaged me. I have no theatrical background. I was rock and roll jockey and got pressed in the service. So I learned it over the years, but it was kind of funny to have a robot for 6 months.
Not the one story. Not the one story. Malvin said that I learned more as Captain C than I ever taught. And it was Steamboat Bill at that time. Exactly the same character, same show. But I went to a camp of disabled kids. And you know what? Fantastic things can happen. And there was a young lady there, Betty, that I had seen many times over several years. She's in a wheelchair, no use of legs, limited use of and went on. And when I was getting ready to leave after talking to all the kids and having a good time, and I made a point of going over to Betty Lou and saying goodbye to her because she was a special friend. And I said, now, you write something to me. I said, well, I'll try, but you know, it's hard. And the little boy's voice behind me said, quit feeling sorry for yourself. I was so mad. And I turned around to face this rude kid. There was a little boy about 9 or 10 years old, with no left arm. And a stump with the right arm. I'll quit feeling sorry for yourself. Do you know to this day, that little boy is right behind me. He rides in the back seat of my car. He's behind me at the dinner table. He can't shake me. And every time I start going the wrong way, I hear him say, oh, I'm really sorry for yourself. The things we got from the kids have to be so much more than free.
Okay, in the photo room upstairs, in about 5 minutes, Lisa and I are going to be signing autographs for an hour, and they'll answer any other questions you have. And that's it. Thank you for coming. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Crowell. First, I'd like to thank you for coming to the Nostalgia Business. Secondly, let's get to our guests. This is George Lewis, the Ghost Host. Yeah! Richard Dix, of the 1950s, Dr. Lucifer. Dyszel, Captain 20, and Chamish Evolve. Sitting beside me is Bill Littman, and myself is Gene, and we're here for the panel discussion. Roll the tape. Feel the intensity.
I remember that one.
September 87. I think I saw it in the photo.
Good evening and welcome to Creature Feature. I am the Count, Gore tonight. tonight, before this festive holiday that so many of you honor, so to say, I've got a family movie. It's about a little bitty boy, about that big, who looks out his bedroom window and sees invaders from Mars. I understand this film is somewhat of a cult classic, so to say. And for those of you who are watching in color, you can turn it off because the black and white's on. It's a black and white film. We'll see. But, you know, there's something that's always bothered me. Every Saturday night now we get together, and I wonder, do people really sit there quietly with their hands folded in their lap watching creature features? Or do they get involved in other activities? Tonight we're going to find out. Because I, Gore, through the Channel 20 Research and Development Department, have created this great gizmo. No, it's not the gremlin. We went to absolutely no expense to bring you this. And we're going to tune it up in a little bit, and by carefully aiming this device here, we should be able to listen to what people are doing while they're watching creature features. It may prove to be interesting. But I'll warm things up, because it's not solid state. Let us get to the first part of our movie tonight. Invaders from Mars. Hang in there. Creature feature will be right back. It's almost ready. My device for listening into people's homes. If the CIA only knew about this. My director was asking me, he said, Gore, what does it do? I mean, what are the lights that flash and the gizmos that turn and all this? And I kept saying, look, I did this on a little bit less budget than Head Start's getting in next year's, allocations. I mean, what do you expect? You get peace. So let's see, right now, let's see if I can aim it, this way. Gaithersburg, I'm looking for. Now I know they're doing Gaithersburg. Hi, Springfield. Oh, wait. Let's try DC. You want us to phone in the fixing shop, all right? So traffic? Here. Polaroid has an offer you won't believe.
The other chapters.
That's what the children are sleeping. Prince George's County. I think I've got to refine this machine a little bit, or maybe analyze the results, or let's get back to invaders from Mars. I guess something's wrong. We're not getting to that dark frequency.
toast is winner. Now I shall remove certain portions of her brain. I wonder what kind of person she'll be when I get through. Oh, if you would still like to enter our contest and perhaps be a ghost hostess, in spite of what you see here, simply send me a photograph with your name and address to the ghost host in care of this station. Then I suppose I really should replace her brain, and what's left of it, and send it all away. Remember, as a ghost host is winner, fate will receive an AM/FM radio. Isn't she lucky? I'm sure she'll never forget winning the contest and visiting my laboratory.
Okay, guys. First question. Did you enjoy doing your character? Mr. Dyszel?
Absolutely not.
Of course.
It was magnificent. It was fun. I mean, it was like, it's close as I ever got to Little Theater. We had, it was a great experience. It energized the people at the station. They all, I mean, everyone, secretaries, the sales staff, everyone would meander through the studio and add something that we would use and abuse them and things like that. And, the audio, technical people, the stars of the show, like people who were sitting back there, I never knew what was going to come up on that like the segment. I never knew what the sound effect was going to be. I just said, "Okay, Lee, take it away," things like that. Yeah, it was a blast. It was always also fun, getting that talking to it.
Yes. What about you, Mr. Lewis?
Well, of course it was fun. It was entirely different approach, I guess, because the ghost host was found for other reasons, probably, because I started working for the station some months before we went on the air. I started with them in 1970 when we went on the air in April '71, and helped them buy equipment, plan shows, and all the rest. And we had no money. And when you buy film, you buy a package of film, maybe 100 films in a package. And the contractor said you have to like to show it 3 times within a 2-year period and so on. And some of these packages became horror movies. It was just a better way of marketing them if you can, instead of mixing them in with all the other prime time movies or whatever, if you separate them and market them through a character. So Ghost Host was that character. However, the Ghost Host had to be produced in some manner that would involve a production figure of 0 and a studio time figure of maybe an hour a year. So what do you do? Before we went on the air, we taped an open and a close, and we taped some cutouts in that laboratory where I'm mixing things without sound. In fact, I was doing Oh, What a Rogue and Peasant's Slave. Is this a monstrous that this layer here was a fiction and a dream of passion? I'm doing that. And so all those cutouts were done before we went on the air in April of 1971. So then it was a matter of going into an audio studio by myself for 40 minutes a week. And I got a butt can, stuck the mic down the butt can, and my head in the butt can, give you a reverb, and did the opening audio, and then cutouts, brief cutouts during the show, and I closed.
You know how many photographs those 2 years?
My head in the butt can. We should have had a documentary. Matter of fact, there are no photos at all of Ghost Host as far as I know. So it was done on less than a shoestring. After about 2 years, we did make another cutout of that, going down the steps and then into a dungeon scene. And then about 2 years later, we made another one with tombstones. So all told, maybe we had invested in the program 8 or 10 hours of studio production time.
And you mentioned where that stairwell...
That stairway was at my father's house on Charles Street, 5502 North Charles Street. And in the dungeon, where we wound up, was in the studio with the dungeon film on paper, no scene. So it had to be done with no money. As a matter of fact, where it says Ghost Host on there, and it shivered a little bit, wavered. It's simple to do in any television studio with any kind of equipment because you just push a button. And what happens, the audio is fed to the video and distorts it and gives it that feeling. And that piece of equipment is like $2,200, and we didn't have $2,200 in 1971 at Channel 45, which is very successful now. But at that time, we didn't have any money. It was a struggle with payroll. So what I did, I got a photographer to give me a developing pan, white porcelain developing pans, and I painted the inside with black. And then on that, I painted Ghost Host, and filled it up with water, and put a camera way up and shot down on it, and jiggled the water. And that, of course, refracted the lettering and gave you that effect. So that did it at an expenditure of 0, just a little bit of time on my part. So it was always a struggle. To be able to do that little studio bit, which we only did maybe 4 or 5 times, with the girl who won the contest, had the privilege of having her brain operated on. We did 3 or 4 of those. But other than that, there was no money, no time spent on it. So it was kind of fun, and we were able to do it all.
Mr. Dix.
Well, I was working at WBAL and had been for a while and was doing a show called Officer Happy, a kids show. And the station brought the package called Shock, which consisted of a lot of old horror movies. And they asked me if I could come up with an idea, and of course it was easy. I had long been a fan of Charles Adams, and book, so I decided to go that route, and I took the Charles Adams kind of idea. I made him a doctor, Dr. Lucifer, and my wife played Mrs. Lucifer. My daughter, who was about 14 at the time, she played our daughter, and our son, who was about that long, played our son, and we had a Weimaraner dog, so we dragged him into the act also. And he was a bumbling scientist. Everything he did turned to garbage. And nothing. Every time he planned some horrific trick on somebody else, it would always fall on him. He was always the one that was caught in the death traps when he said. And on Wednesday, the films would arrive, and a fellow named Lenny Levin and I, we would sit down and we'd watch the film, and then we'd try to pick out a theme from the show, and then we would intercut. We would figure out there were places where there would be a phone conversation between two people. Well, we wrote in the third conversation, and the director would, when we get to that point, they'd stop the film and cut me in, and I'd answer a question. They'd go back to the film, they'd give a stupid answer from the other one, and it would go on back and forth like that. And we interjected the kissing. The two people were coming together just to kiss, and we worked it out so that just as they got together, the girl disappeared and my head came in. And we would do that kind of thing all the time. And one gentleman remembered the closing on one of the shows that the hero and heroine, they all got in the car and they broke down the path to turn left and drive off into the countryside. And as they got down near the end of the driveway, they cut to me with a detour sign setting it up. And then they get back to the film, and the car turns the corner and goes off the cliff. And this kind of thing. And my wife, of course, playing Mrs. Lucifer. And she would make horrible concoctions in the kitchen and things. So we had a heck of a good time with it. And we were even very risque. We had 4 bottles at one time. And as the camera panned across this experiment I was conducting, one bottle had on it 4Q, on the letter Q. And then we got to the second bottle, and it had 4, the number 4, the letter Q, and the letter 2. And we almost got fired after that show. And we had as George said, we had no money. We were able to gather bones, honest to God, skulls. The skulls on the show were real. And the bones that were laying around were real lady bones. And we actually, at one point, we had a real mummy, an Egyptian mummy that we had purchased. And from a guy at Hopkins, a professor. And we had all these things, and then when the show closed, we couldn't get rid of them because we had no death certificate for the mummy. So we couldn't give it to anybody, nor could we sell it to anyone because there was no death certificate. We had all the bones, the human bones, the skull, and we had a hell of a time working it out with the authorities how to get rid of these objects because they were terrible to think that you spend your entire life and you end up as a prop on a stupid horror. But we had a good time. I've talked a lot about it. Is there anything left you want to say? There's not. Okay.
Richard, I remember 4 specific spots that you did. One, if you remember, when Universal Pictures opened, you see the old globe turning around the airplane. He would come on with a pair of aviator goggles and a scarf behind him, driving the plane. After that, there was Dracula's daughter, in which there was a line from everybody at Sloan. And it was asked, who is this? We're talking about Renfield, next to the director. He says, just a poor harmless imbecile who weighs spiders and flies. He's standing there in the London Bobby's outfit with a lobster in his hand. And another one was Invisible Man Returns. There was one guy, I think Stu Kerr was looking through a microscope like this, and he's talking about nothing at all. You see this shot coming in of a girl in a bikini. The funniest one to me was the one in the raid in which this thing it was inserted into the movie. Now, I've never seen this movie before. And the boys, Carl has got a line. Ever since I was born, you people used to look at me and say, now that set of teeth came on and said, do you wear dental plates? Never forgot that.
Mr. Dyszel, on your show, how much of it was scripted and how much of it was improv?
There was a format for every show. Sometimes it said segment 1, fake it. Segment 2, fake it. Segment 3, fake it again. And segment 4, fake it and wrap it up. Most of it wasn't scripted, but it was planned. I feel, we felt like we were working on a shoestring like here, but these gentlemen, we had studio time, we had a really good production facility. I'm a production-minded person. I mean, that open was my ultimate open with the coffee floor meeting and the whole thing. That was the kind of atmosphere. I really like to get into production techniques and the atmosphere kind of thing, but we did do some scripted stuff, and it didn't work out real well, to be very frank. We had some guests on, and occasionally we have a winner of the contest on, and we do a script, and we throw the script away, not worry about it. Most of the time it was, we had an idea. We didn't have the liberty of being able to cover the movie because we had the pre-tape, and we didn't get to work with the film. We had to roll in. It was difficult enough to get them to roll it in correctly, let alone try to mix it into the movie. So we knew we just had to do the breaks. But we would get a theme for the thing, like this, the idea we're just going to listen to what people do, or whatever it might be, and then I'd say, okay, this is what I'm going to do out there. And I'd say to the audio person, make it work. I didn't know what was going to come. I didn't care what was going to come. We also played on the border of crossed the line a few times of risque. Why not? I once asked my program director, I said, before I go into this session, I want to know, you have all these numbers, you have the rating books. Tell me who my audience is. And he sat back, put his feet up on his desk, and he took a drag on a cigarette and said, Gore, according to the rating book, your audience is half female and half stone. Have fun. I said, but don't tell me about it. I don't want to know. And that's the way we did the show from 73, right down to February 73 till Memorial Day weekend 87. We didn't tell people up the top what we were doing, and they could care less, just as long as the ratings came up. And I will say this, at least for the first 2 years when we were competing against Saturday Night Live, we were beating them in the ratings. But we were pulling 5, 6s, and occasionally we pull a 7 rating, share of a rating at 11, 11:30 on Saturday night. It worked out very good. And we had our ups and downs and all this, but we didn't do scripts. Not a whole lot.
Mr. Lewis, you had told me about some interesting fan mail you got from a particular person in Pennsylvania that sent you photos.
Yeah, this guy was a magnificent artist. Of course, anybody in television gets a weird man. Along with a lot of great beautiful mail. But this guy was obviously a good artist. But he would draw a picture every week of how he planned on killing. And one week I would come, and another week I would be killed with a dagger, and more and more far-fetched. And you never know, whether you've got a guy with a fantastic sense of humor or some deranged character out there. So after a while, you let some other people know about it, just in case something turns up. These are coming to the Pennsylvania postmark. You can use that as a lead. So you never know.
Mrs. Lucifer, what's it like being one of the first Queen Queens?
It was fun. It was fun. Got the long black wig and a long black dress, and I feel like we're the old timers. He didn't start until the 73.
Yeah, he's been here a long year.
In the area,
I did before. 70.
70. Well, we started at about 58. So you're real old. And I think the first one, because you didn't start, George, until
71.
71. See, you are
I'm a baby.
You're youngsters. And it was fun. He got out of the coffin too. And I always look forward to the times when he was either sick or had another engagement, because then I took over. And when we talk about being scripted, we would write approximately what we would want to do, but we did not write words down. It was just what we wanted to do. And I've lost memory of the various things we did do. I remember only one thing that I didn't even tell the producer about, or the director about, because I just wanted to surprise him too, and that is I brought in a little dog, little cute dog, little paws, and you know where they say we pause for station identification? And so I held these up to the camera, and I told the cameraman, I said, now take a close-up of these. And I said over the microphone, we pause for station identification. And I heard a lot of people commented on that later. And then later, just maybe 5 years ago, I heard somebody do the same thing. And I felt like I was the original.
There was one time in the studio, that some idiot from this city was spending 5 days in a fish tank, underwater. Why, I don't know. But it went on national television, on the Today Show and all this. And this idiot was underwater all the time for 5 days. So we knew he would be in the studio on Saturday night. So we wrote him in as my daughter's pet. And so the second camera got into the studio, because we didn't have tape in those days. It all had to be done live with a live camera. And so we had our daughter, and we were giving her lectures on how to care for the pet. And we were very upset because she hadn't been doing her job. And then the camera would go over and reveal this man who spent 5 days immersed in a fish tank, a huge fish tank full of water, as her daughter's pet. And you took advantage of whatever you could at the moment. And basically, I think what we did, my wife and I were and still are great fans of Charles Adams. I think he's the funniest individual alive, particularly in cartoons. And actually, on some occasions, we would reproduce pictorially his cartoons. We'd pick up a cartoon and use that as the theme to our show. So we were kind of the Charles Adams family. And Nancy all in black, and myself in the ducks. I had my daughter in cast-offs and stuff like that. So that was... Shut up.
Where are you going from there?
We did one show about that. They make a vulture stew, if I remember correctly. You said send your card letters to 1000 Doody Hill, Baltimore National Cemetery. You all put that real serious.
This is the one to school with my daughter.
College.
College.
That show was something else. It was talk of the schoolyard for a week ahead.
That's nice.
A program called Shock.
Yeah.
And Frankenstein meets the Wolfman was the first, November 28, 1957. 11:15. And we were all planning on staying up past 9 o'clock that night. And I was told Friday night my parents were going to go out to a party, and I was invited. I thought, well, now the plans are going to change here. I'm not going to do this. So finally it got to 11 o'clock. 15 minutes of duty back then. 11:15, I'm sitting here, all the adults walk in. I thought, here they are with their slow gin fizzes, and they're going to turn off this TV set. They said, what's this? I said, Shock, they're going to run a Frankenstein movie. He said, oh, great, wonderful. I haven't seen this in years. So we all sat down and watched Shock, the first Shock.
Got a hell of a memory.
Yes, you do.
That show went a lot. How long did that run, Richard?
Only about 3 years. That's when because I got fired in 1950.
Not 50.
I'm at 60, 1960, when I got fired. So,
Got fired before the show went on.
Channel 9, I think, had their own Shock program on Sunday nights.
yeah, I think so.
But they didn't know.
Yeah, no, they didn't have the host. There weren't many of us. There was myself and a guy in Philadelphia at the time. His name I forgot.
I think Dr. That was the guy that we used to watch all the time.
Oh!
And in the 50s in Chicago, there was Shock Theater. Marvin and his wife and somebody else. I used to watch that when I was a little kid.
Oh! I didn't know. I did know about the guy in Philadelphia, but didn't know about Scotland. There weren't many of us.
They had I told this, and it was a Hollywood actress had a show out in California. She played that little dowager, big hat and all that.
You know it has a
There was one girl skateboarder on Huntington. Fellow did that, Fred Briggs of NBC News.
We going back to the 50s, George?
760s.
Oh, okay. Well, I still old.
We got to remember you're older than I am, Richard.
Yes, that's very true. Mr. Lewis.
Richard and I have been buddies since fifth grade. You gotta understand.
He was our best man. Dressed as ghost host.
No.
Yes, you were.
This is your wedding.
Did Ghost Coast do any appearances, first appearances?
Almost none. For one thing, we were so busy keeping this station going, and so few of us that we were doing everything, so there just wasn't time. Putting on makeup, whatever. I did do a couple of movie openings of horror films, of course. And I did one parade, which was great fun, because, of course, the cast in Chesapeake, I'm smiling all the time, and nice people, and the ghost host has to be nasty. And that was fun. And I rode in this parade, and people applauded when I came by, and I loved it. It was great. And if they didn't, I would, and they started applauding. And or I'd jump off a float and run at somebody, and they take off in the crowd screaming, and wow, this is what power, this is fun. And there was one young lady, pretty lady in her 20s, and I ran at her, and she didn't. I was supposed to run away. So I had to bend down like I was biting her neck. And she said, "You don't scare me one bit, George Lewis." And then the fourth and final appearance was, remember the power plant downtown?
Yeah.
And it had a little club in there. And I appeared there, and it broke all records at the power plant. More people turned up that night than their entire history, and more money was made that night in their entire history. And 2 weeks later, Ghost Host was canceled.
Oh. John Gore, any personal appearances for you besides here tonight?
Well, 2 years ago, right on the stage, singing the Monster Mash. What can I say? We did a few. A couple movie openings, as George would say, and we did actually a couple of remotes. We did one during, there was some thing on Monster on Campus. It was Monster on Campus, was the name of the movie. We actually shot it at the American University. It was fun. First appearances were, not a big deal for us. We actually just did a few. The only thing about personal appearances that were fun, and I was mentioning this to George a while ago, was Crowell Ball has the unique ability to be able to go up any female, almost any female, and implant his teeth on her neck, and have her big 6'8", 400-pound boyfriend laugh. And a great sense of power. I mean, you're right, deadbeat, but as a matter of fact, it was so funny when that did happen. This one movie over there, I was with George Romero. We were opening the movie Mark, down in D.C., somewhere down there in the theater. And this guy looked like he was a linebacker. Huge guy. And I'm walking down, and he's got this people girlfriend, and he says, "You." Yes. White. Oh. Both sides?
If you had the opportunity to do it again, do the shows again, would you do them and what would you do different?
I'll jump in real quick. Watching that first cut, yes, I'd love to do it again because it was a blast and we had a great time.
Yeah.
As long as you had the creative freedom and lack of budget that went with it to make it fun. But I'll tell you what I would do differently right films were 62 minutes long. So, and we didn't have a choice. You know, you can only run so many commercials. And you can say, okay, Gore, you've got to fill 52 minutes. Excuse me? What am I going to do for 52 minutes? I mean, yeah, well, anything you want, just make it work. And we had some of the segments were much too long. But, you know, that was part of it. Yeah, I love it. I still have the set. I still have the coffin.
At home?
No, I have a friend of mine who's storing it for me. We have I have the props at home, though. The props, a lot of them came from Baltimore. We had a pretty good following up here. The skulls came from Hopkins. We had some medical students there that were big into it. Funny story, and I'll shut up. The portrait of Count Gore behind the set that we used came from Baltimore. The young lady, she wrote me a letter, Peter Gore. My mother's a professional artist. She'd like to do your portrait. Send us a photo. We'll send you an oil. Right. Sure. Next. Hey, eventually, about 6 months later, I came across it again, and I had a really bad photo of a color one, and I sent it to her. I get a call 6 weeks later. Your portrait's ready. Excuse me? Your portrait's ready. The only condition was she wanted to present it to me on the program. And I said, hey, what the hell? Come on. So they drove down, and this case was really kind of funny because I was sitting there getting myself ready, and the director comes in, you want to see the beautiful blonde with this look on it? And I said, excuse me, I will. And I said, how old? He said, 25. I said, I love it already. She's going to be a star. And we had a page one tape sheets went down, so we had a long delay, and I was talking with her, and we were just chit-chatting and so forth. And find out that she was in junior high school. I said, where? And her mother was there. Her mother was actually, she didn't, her mother did the state portrait of Spiro Agnew, who was governor. Great, what a great thing I did. Spiro Agnew. Yeah. But anyway, she came on the show, and her line was, Gore, do anything to get on the show, and here it is. And there it was. And that's been here ever since. It's still in my mantle, above my mantelpiece at home.
All right.
I get to look at it every time I watch television because I don't have a fireplace. I get the TV on the fireplace.
This was one I wouldn't mind trying again because I had a lot of fun. And knowing what the market is now, there are certain things that would be to my advantage. If they wanted to do it, then I could say to them, okay, this is what I'd like, and this is what I'd like. I'd like somebody to help with the writing. I'd like a budget of X number of dollars. I'd like to do this, and I'd like to do that. And if you can do all those things, then I'd be willing to take a shot. And like Gore said, I learned a lot, although mine was different because I ran until the program was as long as the film and the intercuts that I wanted to put in. After that stage signed off. So I didn't have this problem. So I didn't have to fill an awful lot of time. But I wouldn't mind taking another crack at this at about 1 o'clock in the morning or 12:30 night, Saturday night or Sunday morning. Yeah, this would be fun to do again because there's so many more things you can do. The equipment is so fantastic. It would take us hours of talking hours. That's ridiculous. But it took a little while to sit down and figure out how we were going to do the little cuts because by that time all you could do was half a screen. And that took a lot of work to split it up so that you could do half. Nowadays, a guy sits in the little booth and touches a knob and the screen splits into thousands of pieces so that your imagination could go a heck of a lot further. And I think it would be a lot of fun to try this particular thing again, but I don't think we'll ever do it.
Yeah, I enjoy doing it. When I said we had no money to do it, you said you did cheater. You had a live camera once a week.
Yeah, that we did.
You know, and a director there was.
That we did.
So, but it would be fun to have a crew for maybe 4 hours a week even. That's really some excellent. so much. It would be great fun.
Although, you know, you can't, I found this out late. We went to 2 phases of Feature. We started off in 73 and went to 79 and got canceled on a regular basis. We did annual shows and then picked it up in 84. And I found that the more equipment we got, you get trapped into saying, oh, gee, we got this. We can depend on it. And you lost a lot of creativity. It was a lot more, in some ways it was more fun. Sometimes I had to stop and say, cool, let's not use this new digital gizmo here. Let's do something else instead. And, you know, so that you can get trapped in the technology real easy. But it's fun to have.
And I would say that I think it would be more fun to do it live instead of taping it ahead of time and knocking out all the mistakes, because the mistakes are fun. How you get out of the mistakes in live TV is fun.
You never took the mistakes out, but that was the thing. You taped it live. Tape was wonderful because you taped it live, and we never went. One time we actually went back, in all the years we went back and redid something, and that only was because actually we had the tape was malfunctioning tape. You know, we couldn't air it. We had to go back and do it again. But no, twice. I'm sorry. The second time was when we had the Rites of Spring contest on, and the winner came on, and he had written this composition, and the dancers came on opposite. We rolled tape on it, and then I'm sitting there going, God! and here are these girls in blue body paint and red body paint, and they're bouncing around. The camera going crazy.
Who's got that tape now?
And so after the segment was over, we let the segment roll all the way through. After the segment was over, I said, went to talk to my director and said, save it. Put another reel up. We're going to do that again. I went out there. I said, hey, look, we can't do this. But they're wearing paint. No, we can't do it. I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I'll show the tape to our program director. The only promise I made, and I kept it. He enjoyed it. He wanted a copy. And we take the segment over with them wearing something on the top. But we take that for a long. Tape was one of the things you could file that.
Well, I don't disagree there. I'd still rather do it live.
And have it. Because we have no record of the shock series at all.
I don't want a record.
Oh, it'd be fun to have.
Nancy, if you owned a television station, all your money invested in a TV station, would you let Richard Dyszel live and
Nowadays, yes.
Nowadays, I would say.
Yeah, because you could say almost anything.
That's true.
So he was fired from the AL because he...
When I started in radio, I couldn't say the word drink.
Oh, gosh, no.
Much less a damn, I know.
Paul Shields, the staff announcer at WBAL, was fired because he said hell. Lost his job because he said hell.
There was one guy at WJZ who was fired for breaking the wind into the microphone one time. The entire control booth.
Well, what the hell went on there? Oh! Yeah, well, you got a lot of trouble because you said the water closet. Yeah. I don't know if it's right, but yes, it was office. And I kind of think it was better, damn it. There are things that you shouldn't be so blatant about. There are, nowadays, if you want to get angry and insult somebody, and you get so furious and you want to say something that'll shake them to their roots, what the hell word are you going to say that's going to shake anybody? There's nothing you can say that'll make somebody want to come up and hit you in the mouth. Huh? Taxes. You got the one word, but that's not a vulgar word. But it's all So we dilute the language too much. The language gets diluted. I'm sorry, that has nothing to do with this.
Question. Let's take some questions now. I would like to just like to know if you all really consider yourself hardcore fans, and also what your favorite film that you showed when you were host.
I was more of a sci-fi fan than a horror film. I like the old Universal films. I still do. But I really, in my head, say about the 50s B films that I grew up with. Them. It came from outer space. Creature from the Black Lagoon. My favorite along that genre would be Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I love it when they destroy the Capitol. Right! And Harryhausen's, animation was wonderful. So that's my big.
I would deal with the. I like the Frankenstein, the Wolfman. I like the horror shows that to me were spooky. Mummy,
Boris Karloff.
Karloff was
Peter
those,
Lorre.
and Lon Chaney. Those were the kind of films that I could have more fun with those. Still do.
Yeah, Lon Chaney here.
Christopher Lee. Well, he's later.
Yeah.
But
Dr. and Mrs. Lucifer, do you have any kind of anecdotes about when the shop first came on and subsequently when it ran, the reaction you got from maybe parent groups and things and the reaction from the audience? Was there any kind of comments made on the show?
Well, we didn't get a lot of adverse criticism because I guess in those days people didn't let the kids stay up late except college students and high school students. So we never got any irate parents saying that you're scaring the hell out of my elementary school son. No, we got only positive reviews.
I don't think there were too many young children in elementary school or even early junior high school who watched. I mean, the parents really curtailed the watching in their bed hours a lot more then than they do now.
Although you did have tendency to make us want to sneak out of bed
But nobody complained about it. We never got any adverse criticism. Yes, sir. You with the camera.
Thank you. I was wondering if the three gentlemen, would there be an opportunity to reprise your roles for something local, like maybe a Baltimore commercial or something that would bring you three together in uniform again? Well, two of you together with three in uniform.
Well, personally, I don't think anybody would know. They would remember this gentleman because he's more recent. They remember George, but they wouldn't know who the hell I was. And there are just a very few of you in this room who know who the hell I am and what the heck I did. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I would be the fifth wheel on the wagon.
I think it would be great fun, except it would be kind of funny to see me with these two gentlemen, and there I am with my head in a buck kick, trying to recreate the voice.
I have the same question for Gore. As far as like any letters that came in from like children, I was a small child watching Gore Hall, and it used to scare me to death. So, I mean, did you ever get any letters from any parents?
No. We got lots of letters. We get some really, like, George brought up the thing of plain Misty thing. I mean, we got lots of strange stuff in the mail. Matter of fact, once this young lady who ended up being on the show was like 12 years old. She brought with her audio tapes of every show we had done. She would stay up and repeat them on audio tape, and she presented them to me. So it was strange. She has since grown up and become a solid citizen. More or less. She attends things like Fanex and Kool, things like that. So you can't say too solid. But no, we never got a lot of complaints. Or even there was a lot of supportive stuff from a lot of groups. Fanex. Yes, sir.
First, we say that I remember struggling very hard to stay away from the one-on-one session.
Thank you.
But I wonder if you ever got anything from the response about things like the pre-Christmas show. I remember where you talked about sulfuric acid aftershave played into a commercial for
No, we never got, I don't think, what commercials we had, mostly we had PSA spots, public service announcements. those few things that we did have, I don't think they stayed up to watch it either. So they didn't know what the hell they were getting. They would be buying a package 8 spots throughout the day, and the station could schedule them where the heck ever they were. Mostly I had public service announcements, and very few, but no, nobody ever said it to me.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'd like to have that story turned out with the guy that's singing his painting.
Oh, they finally just stopped. No explanation. Never knew who did it. Whether he's in a loony bin or just a fine artist. Never know.
You think this is the real George? He got to it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so when you were doing appearances at Chesapeake, did any of the kids ever catch on that you were also Gary's host?
I had next door neighbors who didn't know I was going to. Really, truly.
Yeah.
People I knew real well.
We used to argue as kids, you know, because I always thought that you were. I mean, I had a feeling that you were going to go to school, and the kids were like, nah. But,
Yeah, I had personal friends who would say, oh, who does Ghostbusters? That's how I do. No, really.
There are 2 of them sitting right up here because when he first went on the air, we argued about it. I said, that can't be George. It doesn't sound a bit like George.
Yes, it does sound like
It can't be George.
It
At one time I said, that's George. I forgot what you did, but that's
I didn't mind have my head torn off the butt kid.
Yeah.
Oh, it's over there. Oh, one question?
No? Don't argue over it.
I want to know if you saved those pictures that the man sent you that which killed everything.
No, I don't think I still have them. I should have, shouldn't I? Rich and I were talking about that earlier. If we had saved the stuff that seemed like everyday things to us, nice pictures with Ellen Hayes, everybody you can think of.
You should have made a scrapbook of your show, like including things like that come in.
I know that now. But, at the time, these were everyday things, and somehow you didn't attach the importance to it that I do now. I wish I had more of editorial history. I had nothing of those photos. Gene, I'm just going to make a copy of what you all have.
This afternoon, a gentleman came up.
It was Dave sitting in the back there, the gentleman named Dave.
Oh, well, Dave came up with a newspaper article, a copy of the newspaper article, advertising for a show that we did when you were asking about personal appearances. We did down at the old Stanley Theater, which none of you probably know about. And before your time. No. Anyway,
That's like 6 sandwiches in town.
they were showing The Fly, and they asked us to find people and host it. And they had in the orchestra pit, they had a stage that came up, and we all gathered on the stage, and we got, if any one of you know George Gogol down at Jones Costumers, George was the Wolfman, and an actor, a local actor, Joe Bandiera, was Dracula. Yep, that's right. And we did that, and it showed The Fly. Now, this is the original Fly, which we found much more interesting than the current repeats of The Fly, Fly 1, Fly 2. But,
and I want to say to Dave, because I don't like George, I have nothing, I threw virtually everything out. And I went home and showed the ad to Nancy, and she said, oh yeah, and she had in her, and I'll show you, it's a photo that was taken on the stage of the Stanley that ties into that ad, which is a very strange thing, because that's about the only 2 or 3 pieces of Dr. Lucifer that I have, and yours tie right into one thing that she had. So I want to show you that.
But it was interesting, Dave, I don't know whether he mentioned it or not, as a part of the promo, which WBAL, of course, financed, they hired a hearse, and we arrived in a hearse, and it got a lot of people.
Oh, in front of the Stanley.
At the Stanley.
The ad No one admitted alone. Unless you sign a waiver in our lobby.
Those were the days. Well, we'd like to thank you for coming on.
And I'd like to thank you all for asking me. I really didn't think when they first called and invited, I said, A, there's a damn soul alive that's going to remember what we're talking about. And B, secondarily, I don't think there's more than 6 people who would have any interest in it at all. And on both things, I have been proven wrong. And I really enjoyed myself today.